West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Okay, Alabama is once again becoming the battleground of the civil rights movement, with the Supreme Court set to hear a challenge to Alabama's new congressional maps and what role race must play when states draw their district lines. Now, this will be one of the first cases that Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson will hear on the Supreme Court now that she's been confirmed by the Senate. Joining me now to talk about all that and more is the plaintiff in that very case and executive director of Alabama Forward, Evan Milligan, and here with me on set, very happy to say, my friend LaTosha Brown. She's the co-founder of Black Voters Matter. Evan, I want to start with you. Tell me why this case matters, not just to Alabama, but really to the entire South.
Sure, and thank you for having me, Tiffany. Hello, LaTosha. So this case really hinges on the interpretation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Section 2 prohibits a state or a political subdivision of a state from using any standard practice or procedure that results in denial or abridgment of the right of any citizen of the United States to vote on account of race and color. And it also prohibits dilution of voting through the use of redistrict plans that pack or crack communities of color to deny them the ability to constitute a majority in a single district or multiple districts. So basically what that means is here in Alabama, we had a map that diluted Black voter representation in the congressional map. We challenged that map and won at the lower court, at the lower district court in the federal system, which was a unanimous, actually a unanimous verdict. And now that case is going to go before the Supreme Court in October for them to actually review the merits of that lower court's decision to determine really the fate of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
So thank you for that, Evan. And LaTosha, you know, when we think about voting rights, I feel guilty saying this to you because I'm exhausted. So I know you must be exhausted, and you're out there on the front lines every day. People aren't really necessarily thinking about redistricting, redrawing the maps and things like that. They're typically thinking about voter suppression actually at polls, but it starts way before then. How can voters navigate that? And given Congress's failure, I feel like people are looking to you to help them navigate that. So thank you. But tell us what to do.
Well, you know, thank you for the question. I think we really need to understand what is happening in this moment right now.
Yeah.
Even if we go back to the Alabama case, we need to recognize that 27% of the population of the state of Alabama are African Americans. Mm-hmm. They have less than 14% representation on the congressional level, right? And so what you see is a state that has been a very bad actor around voting rights. They have a history of marginalizing voters. And how did that change? That changed when people were organized, came together. When we think about what happened in Selma, Alabama, and the voting rights movement taking place in Alabama, it was actually actually directly and result of people organizing, saying we've got to do more. We actually got to change the law. And so I think we have to continue to go to the courts and appeal to the courts, but we also have to organize. We have to organize around elections. We have to organize making sure that we're educating people on the issues, but we've got to really be a power. And part of it is we've got to put pressure because there's a concerted effort to marginalize the black vote and the black voice in this nation right now.
Yeah, the black vote. And also, I think about Georgia. And so, Evan, this is a question to you. Listen, in Georgia, there was a multi-ethnic, multiracial coalition. And while everybody's celebrating the confirmation of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, that would not have happened had the voters of Georgia not confirmed Senators or elected Senators Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff. So elections have consequences. So as we are in this midterm cycle, how do you say voters of Alabama can navigate this? Because, again, this casts a wide net of influence across the entire South.
Sure. Well, we definitely invite anybody listening who wants to learn more about how this case impacts their work and their daily lives to go to powerontheline.org. And over the summer and in the fall, really for the next year, we're going to be working with regional allies, national allies, Black Voters Matter, with Latasha and Cliff, to really make sure that our civic groups across the state and across the country understand the importance of this case. Gerrymandering and redistricting can really appear to be complex, sort of inside baseball sort of things. But when we look at what Americans and our neighbors in Alabama are able to figure out, they figure out the NCAA, the SEC tournament process.
Exactly.
They figure
That's
out
right.
Bitcoin. We figure out things when we know that it's personal to us. And we know that we can help our neighbors understand the importance of this. And this is something, as Latasha was saying, that requires a movement, a social movement, a cultural
Everybody
movement.
has to do a little.
People really understand what's on the line.
I want to stick with you, Evan, because, a part of me thinks about this case could potentially backfire. Because if it goes to the Supreme Court and they are able to further dismantle voting rights, particularly Section 2, are you worried about that? Because then we have to remember there's still a 6-3 majority conservative court with not one, not two, but 3 Trump-appointed justices.
Right. Well, we don't proceed from a place of worry when it comes to asserting our rights and asserting our constitutional rights. That was what's happening in this case, and I hope that folks around the country continue to bring these cases and continue to assert their rights. Too many people died for us to have the rights and to have the ability to go into court and to file these claims in the first place. And if we have an adverse ruling, that's really where the power of a broad-based cultural movement comes in. And that's not a place we've been here before historically. After the Civil Rights Act of 1875, there was particularly devastating reaction against the gains of Reconstruction, and yet our movements continue to push forward, and that's what we'll have to do here if we can't. If we have something that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, but I think the bigger issue of this case, Latasha, is, I always say the South is only red until it ain't. They can bleed us by 1,000 cuts, but, try to shut us down. We buy rather round. We're still in it. Right. So just, if you can, because you always bring a word to the Cross Connection family, people are tired. They're exhausted. They're worried about, post-pandemic paying their mortgage. Like, what is the inspiration for people to realize elections have consequences, and if the Republicans take back Congress, it's going to directly impact their life?
Oh, absolutely. And we need to understand the implications of this case in particular. As we're seeing voter suppression in the many forms that is taking place right now, I do want to remind people that in Selma, Alabama, there were 600 people that were on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Only 600 people. They knew that they didn't have government on their side. They knew that they were going to be met with resistance from the local law enforcement, right? But they also knew that they stood on the side of righteousness and they stood on the side of democracy. They organized themselves. They took their fight to the courts. They took their fight to the streets. They took their fights to the polls. And we've got to do the same thing. We've got to demand federal legislation in this moment. We can't back away. We've got to lean in even greater in this moment. We have to organize on the state level, and we've actually got to educate people around, if democracy is to be real in this country, we have to make it be so.
It is Monday, the 11th of April of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. That's right. It has been a weekend, has it not? Well, we do have a little blurb about Elon Musk and his, shall we say, bored endeavor. See what I did there? But suffice it to say that at least we won't have Elon Musk on the board of directors to kick around when we get a chance. Yeah, that guy was trolling us the whole weekend, wasn't he? He was. The war obviously continues apace. It looks like Vladimir Putin will be, increasing his endeavor. Yes, it is quite an endeavor. When they're caught red-handed, they'll never admit wrong. They'll just double, triple, quadruple down. Donald Trump continues with his Nuremberg rallies. How is that possible that he is allowed to do that? Is that what free speech is all about? Huh. Okay. I believe these venues he's going to have a choice to have him there or not. But I guess money trumps all. No pun intended. I see that the national real estate associations are fighting against looking into money laundering in the real estate industry, specifically Russian money laundering, going after oligarchs' laundering of money through real estate investments. Money is more important than loyalty to the United States of America, while a hostile foreign power who has declared war on us is sending its emissaries to come and F up our system. And we have business leaders fighting the endeavor to fight those Russian attempts to subvert our system. I really don't want to hear about loyalty and who can govern and who cannot. And I mean that in the authoritarian mindset, because obviously we are not worthy to govern because we're not human. But don't talk about punching the Nazis because you're a violent person. Well, they are purposely sending out messages to go and attack people at their homes. And they are. Okay. When the expansion of the United States westward occurred, part of the strategy was that you would throw settlers out there into the wilderness, while at the same time, your explorers, your scouts, are forging the trail ahead, sometimes years ahead of time. And pretty much, selling guns and whiskey to the indigenous tribes there. And then when settlers came upon that area, not necessarily the best neighbors of the world now, were they? A reprisal by the indigenous tribes in those areas would occur. And because they had guns and, hopped up on whiskey, things would happen. And because things would happen, the settlers would complain. And it was all part of a plan, because when the settlers complained, well, then what would happen? Well, then a fort would be built. And then further up the trail, out there in the wilderness, the scouts are selling guns, whiskey, and a lot of atrocities at the same time. And they weren't selling those, they were just giving them away. And then when the reprisals happened, which were sure to occur, settlers needed another fort to protect them from these savages. And therefore, we leapfrogged across the continent on smallpox blankets, rifles, whiskey, atrocity, reprisal against the reprisal. Next thing you know, religion? How religious are you? Oh, no, we're not talking about people who are protecting the land, you animist. All right. Sounds colonial. Sounds imperial, doesn't it? It is. It is. All right. Well, we could go on with the long rants, but maybe we might devote more time to the curated part of this show on this fantastic River City Hash Mondays. Well, at the top, yes, Alabama once again becomes the battleground of the civil rights movement, because history may not repeat, but it does resonate. And sometimes it repeats while it resonates. On the rest of the menu, I just love saying that, President Joe Biden is expected to nominate an Obama-era U.S. attorney to run the ATF as the administration unveils its formal rule to rein in ghost guns. The average U.S. price of a gallon of gas has dropped 10 cents in the last 2 weeks, to $4.27 per gallon. And after a weekend of tech bro trolling, Elon Musk will not be joining the Twitter board of directors. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where China closed the manufacturing hub of Guangzhou, or is that Guangzhou, as the nation battles, wait for it, a major COVID-19 surge in its big eastern cities. And Asian stock markets followed Wall Street lower after the Federal Reserve indicated it might raise interest rates to cool U.S. inflation. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link, across the page near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, because we need the money. Yes, we do. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds to us once a month, I can't tell you how much it helps. I know times are tough and people have to pull back on their contributions in this time of woe. But when you're able to, could you maybe buy us a coffee and then send those funds our way so we can pay our bills and then fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance against dark forces arrayed against not only the United States of America, not only our way of life, but representative democracy around the world. We cannot let it happen, and we won't. And thank you for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended, oh so many years ago. 11, in our case, yes, 11 years of a continuous 24/7, 365 resistance broadcasting. That's what we are, and we have you to thank for it. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. And both he and Kelly do a lot more than just take care of things. They take care of things. Okay, I want to make that clear. If you would follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. You know who they are. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And do please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found. And of course, the deep archive of the whole of the Netroots Radio Library, which we are still adding shows from years gone by, can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. All right. Oh, boy, I have the postnasal drip going on, a little bit of an allergy. I hope it's an allergy and not a cold. I don't want a cold, but it's an allergy. These things often occur when I don't get enough sleep, and then for some reason my defenses are lowered. And the histamines activate the antihistamines, and next thing I know, sneezing fits, postnasal drip, and all of the rudiments of pain and anguish that occur when one has an allergy. Okay. Yeah, we have a change in the weather, too. That's the other part. Is, we had some pretty nice warm weather, and we'll be getting into the weather soon here in the show. But we do. We are under a winter advisory. Yeah, in April. I guess that's normal, if it's a new normal. All right, let's tuck into this first offering. Yes, that's what we do here in the salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And this first offering comes out of the Associated Press by Michael Basalmo. President Joe Biden is nominating an Obama-era U.S. attorney to run the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives as his administration unveils its formal rule to rein in ghost guns. Those are privately made firearms without serial numbers that are increasingly cropping up at crime scenes. And 6 people that were familiar with the matter told the Associated Press. So not just 3 sources, 6. Biden is expected to make the announcement nominating Steve Dettelbach, who served as a U.S. attorney in Ohio from 2009 to 2016, at the White House today. And these people are not authorized, who gave this information to the AP, to discuss the nomination publicly, but they can do it if they don't tell anybody who they are. And so they did. The administration will also release the finalized version of its ghost gun rule, which comes as the White House and the Justice Department have been under growing pressure to crack down on gun deaths and violent crime in the U.S. Dettelbach's confirmation is likely to be an uphill battle for the Biden administration because we have seditionist insurgents sitting in the halls of Congress, obstructing the work of the United States right down to fighting our enemies who have declared war on us. Just saying. Biden had to withdraw the nomination of his first ATF nominee, gun control advocate David Chipman, after the nomination stalled for months because of opposition from Republicans and some Democrats in the Senate. And I'm looking at you, Cinema and Mansion. Associated Press staff bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. The average U.S. price of a gallon of regular grade gasoline dropped 10 cents over the past 2 weeks to $4.27 per gallon as oil prices continue to yo-yo. Industry analyst Trilby Lundberg said yesterday, Sunday. The price at the pump was $1.32 above what it was 1 year ago, according to the Lundberg survey taken on Friday. Nationwide, the highest average price for regular grade gas was in Los Angeles at $5.85 per gallon. The lowest was in Tulsa, Oklahoma at $3.52 per gallon, because they are the special people. According to the survey, the average price of diesel was $5.13 per gallon, down 2 cents over 2 weeks. Lundberg said prices dropped dramatically in the past 2 weeks, in part because higher prices reduced demand during the second half of March. However, the drop is not predictive of further declines because, among other things, the global oil supply is tight due to a dip in output last month by OPEC. And the war in Ukraine has also sparked global uncertainty. The U.S. has banned all Russian energy supplies, but Lundberg said sanctioned Russian oil is still finding big buyers like India and China happy to pay discount prices. Associated Press staff bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Twitter's largest investor, billionaire Elon Musk, or is it Elon, is reversing course and will no longer join the company's board of directors less than a week after being awarded a seat. Twitter CEO Parag Agrawal announced the news, which followed a weekend of Musk tweets suggesting changes to Twitter, including making the site ad-free. Nearly 90% of Twitter's 2021 revenue came from ads. However, a number of tweets posted by Musk over the weekend regarding potential changes at Twitter no longer appear on the platform. Why don't we just take the W out of Twitter? Want an edit button? No, not now. Elon's appointment to the board was to become officially effective on 4/9, but Elon shared that same morning that he would not be joining the board. Agrawal wrote in a reposted note originally sent to Tesla employees. I believe this is for the best. I think that's actually sent it to Twitter employees, but nonetheless. Agrawal did not offer an explanation for Musk's apparent decision. He said the board understood the risks of having Musk, who is now the company's largest shareholder, as a member, but it believed Elon as a fiduciary of the company, where he, like all board members, has to act in the best interests of the company and all our shareholders, was the best path forward, he wrote, because obviously the shareholders of Twitter mean nothing and little to nothing to Elon Musk. The rapidly evolving relationship between Musk and Twitter began exactly 1 week ago when regulatory filings revealed the mercurial billionaire had amassed a 9.2% stake in the social media platform, making him its largest shareholder. Twitter gave Musk a seat on the board on the condition that he not own more than 14.9% of the company's outstanding stock, according to a regulatory filing. While Musk has been one of Twitter's loudest critics, the sudden withdrawal from the board, which became official on Saturday, could signal that the rapidly evolving narrative between Musk and Twitter will become more acrimonious. Well, I think the official rejoinder to that is, no shit, Sherlock. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, here's the deal. I keep hearing people call Morbius a Marvel movie when it's not. You see, superhero comics have been popular, beloved, and even great, but they haven't been consistently profitable. Hence, going into the 90s, Marvel was in deep, deep doo-doo, so they sold the film rights to some of their heroes. The Fantastic Four, Daredevil, and the X-Men went to 20th Century Fox, and they sold Spider-Man to Sony, who proceeded to turn out 2.5 decent Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire. Meanwhile, Disney buys Marvel, Marvel Studios is born, and now Marvel makes movies, but without its mutants, which for the record I think has only helped them, and without its flagship hero. Fast forward to the 2010s, and Marvel Studios wants Spidey back badly. Luckily, Sony's Andrew Garfield Spider-Man Stumble birthed negotiations which led to Marvel Studios teaching Sony how it should be done with Tom Holland in Captain America Civil War. Today, Marvel Studios remains very hands-on with actual Spidey movies, but Sony owns the rights to the character still. And because, money, they want to milk their property after its Marvel-helped successes, so they crank out Spider-Man adjacent movies, hence Venom, Venom and Carnage, and Morbius. Understanding this deal is important because there still remains a qualitative difference between a Marvel Studios film and a Sony movie. Morbius is your basic horror superhero hybrid. Arrogant, unsympathetic scientist turns himself into a monster, but we root for him because he accidentally creates a worse monster, and they stick the formula. Setup, event, chase, fight, damsel in distress, woman in a refrigerator, showdown, fight, triumph, last moment reveal to tease the sequel, done. The thing is, when Marvel movies click, the formula is just a jumping off point for interesting themes and moving character moments. That's not Morbius. But it's fine, it's decent, it's just not, marvelous. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back in our channel on YouTube.
Hi, and welcome to COVID Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series.
This is your fast track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research and help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today, we'll talk about the plan for a second vaccine booster shot,
the prospects of a new COVID wave and whether people will put on masks to stop it,
and how to think about COVID risk when it comes to everyday activities.
This week, the FDA authorized a second booster shot on top of the ones given last year. That would be 4 shots total for me, Tanya. Why this new one?
It happened sooner than I expected, Josh, although the scientific community had been debating whether additional booster shots were needed for some time. Normally, the FDA holds a meeting of its advisory committee before deciding whether to authorize vaccines or boosters, but that didn't happen this time. The move makes boosters available to adults age 50 and older, and anyone 12 and older who is immunocompromised, 4 months after their first booster shot. For people who had 2 shots and a booster, this would be their 4th shot. For some immunocompromised folks, this would be their 5th shot.
That's a bunch of jabs. Why does the FDA think we need this new one?
It was based on some evidence that immune protection against severe disease wanes over time in these groups. A recent CDC report found that protection against hospitalization waned from 91% to 78% 4 months after a third dose. But some experts are not convinced that a second booster shot will significantly improve immunity. It may top up antibodies for a few months, but at a certain point with additional shots, we may see diminishing returns. For those who haven't gotten their first booster yet, that is important to do. And if you're older or higher risk, you might want to consider getting a second booster after 4 months to top up your protection. It seems like many people have ditched their masks, and health officials are allowing it. But if a new COVID surge comes, Josh, will people put them on again?
That's a really important question, because some kind of surge is coming, and we know masks stop infections. The effectiveness of a good mask like an N95 is beyond dispute, as you've pointed out, Tanya. And we will face more COVID. Infections and hospitalizations have started to rise in Europe. The new BA2 variant is becoming more common there and in the US. And like Europe, we've cut back on masks and on restrictions. So we're likely to see something, a spike, a surge, or whatever you want to call it. It's not clear how big it will be. But if it gets above a certain level, we should put masks back on, according to the CDC. If cases and hospitalizations per 100,000 people in your area jump up by 20 hospitalizations a week, if you're starting from a low level of cases, then put on a mask when you're indoors with other people.
But masks aren't just health aids. During the pandemic, they've become political symbols. Some people are really pro-mask, and others are adamantly opposed to them.
Exactly. So how's that going to play out in the future? I asked an expert on mask attitudes, Emily Mendenhall, a medical anthropologist at Georgetown University. She just published a book called Unmasked, based on research in communities in Iowa and in California. Emily's talked with us about masks on an earlier episode. She says anti-mask feelings stem partly from perceptions of low disease risk. People would unmask if they weren't worried about themselves. Maybe they were younger and didn't think the disease would make them sick. And partly it was political. People said they didn't want governments dictating their behavior. They had legitimate worries about business closures and their ability to make a living. But it was also about making a public show of defiance. Masks got caught up in all that. Pro-mask feelings come from an idea that we faced a collective risk. In the street, Emily says, people would talk about the need to work together and protect one another. And obviously, they also felt they were in danger as individuals, and they trusted government guidelines. As the pandemic has worn on, these collective worries have faded in many places, and mask wearing has faded with them. Without actual rules such as mandates, people in those areas are unlikely to put masks back on. But Emily says there's another group that we overlook, the sometimes maskers. That's about 1 in 3 people in her research. They're all political moderates. Sometimes government does a good job, they say, and sometimes not. Sometimes the media is trustable, other times not so much. And sometimes they wear a mask. There are huge swaths of Americans who would put on a mask if they were around someone with a weak immune system, or someone older, or at risk in some way. So the focus should be on sometimes maskers. That's who's willing to listen to mask promotion if COVID starts to peak in their communities. It's a sizable group, Emily says. They could be part of making mask wearing seem normal, especially in times of danger. And making it normal is key. Emily still thinks mandates are important, but she understands there's a lot of resistance. If these sometimes maskers put on N95s, they could start a whole surge of protection. Clearly, people are growing tired of restrictions as we head into pandemic year 3. Many are eager to get back to doing things they enjoy again. Is there a smart way to evaluate any risks as we venture out more often?
We're definitely getting to the point, Josh, where people are tired of wearing masks, of social distancing, and avoiding the people and places they enjoy. But the virus hasn't gone away, and it isn't likely to anytime soon. There will always be some level of risk, but as with everything in life, we have to find ways to balance risks with benefits. One of our freelancers, Sri Deva Bhaktuni, is working on a story for us about this. He asked a number of experts in epidemiology, risk assessment, and related fields how they make their own decisions about COVID risk. We can think about risk in 3 different ways, they said. There's personal risk, which is the risk of you or people in your household contracting COVID. There's community risk, which is the likelihood of encountering someone with COVID in your local community. And there's exposure risk, which accounts for the chances of getting COVID from a particular setting based on things like airflow and the behavior of other people. Caitlin Jetelina, an epidemiologist at the University of Texas, Houston, says that age is the biggest personal risk factor, followed by having certain comorbidities or being immunocompromised. She estimates that vaccinated and boosted people in their 60s have a 10 times higher likelihood of dying from severe breakthrough cases than 18 to 49-year-olds. People who are at higher risk should talk with their doctors about what risks are reasonable. There may be some activities that are safe if you take precautions such as wearing an N95 mask, for example. Then there's community risk. In other words, the risk that the person next to you has COVID. There's not one metric that perfectly captures this risk, but you can look at things like daily cases per 100,000 residents. Jetelina considers a figure below 50 cases per 100,000 to be lower risk, and she might feel comfortable removing her mask indoors. Others use a lower threshold of 10 cases per 100,000. But since not everyone who has COVID is getting tested, a better measure may be the test positivity rate. Anything above 5% is considered high risk.
What about different settings, like bars or movie theaters or a local park? Where you are affects risk, doesn't it?
That's right. Exposure risk is a spectrum. Some settings are safer than others. Depending on your personal and community risk levels, you might be more or less comfortable doing things in certain settings. Gyms, for example, are probably one of the highest risk places because people are exercising and expelling more aerosols, which spread the virus, says Lindsay Marr, a professor of civil and environmental engineering at Virginia Tech and an expert on airborne transmission of viruses. Bars are risky too because they may be crowded and have lots of people talking loudly. But museums and movie theaters might be safer because they tend to have higher ceilings, so there's more air dilution and fewer people are talking. If you do go to a bar or restaurant, experts say you can remove your mask briefly to take sips or bites without increasing the risk too much. And N95s protect you pretty well if they're well fitted to your face. At the end of the day, you have to decide how to balance these risks with the benefits of doing the things that make life worth living. Now you're up to speed. Thanks for joining us. Our show is edited by Jeff Del Vicio.
Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly and check out SciAm.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair? Or...
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, I'm Tom Harbin, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I think we can now say the obvious. The Republican Party has gone bull goose bonkers.
its leaders have turned the once proud GOP brand into an unprincipled gaggle of corporate profiteers, hate-mongers, and screwball conspiracy theorists. They're so far out that the Hubble telescope couldn't find them. But where is my Democratic Party? Here's a transformative opportunity to forge a solid political coalition, a multiracial, urban-rural, farm-labor alliance based on fundamental principles and programs of fairness and opportunity for all. Isn't that what the party says it stands for? This is the prime time to demonstrate it, to reach out and unite ordinary Americans behind a national agenda of lasting progressive change. It's not like the party elders would have to start from scratch, for an energized, feisty movement of grassroots battlers against corporate greed and government injustice is already organizing, winning, and growing popular support all across the country. But rather than welcoming and building on the exciting advances of these popular movements, the party's old-line insider clique of big funders, consultants, and corporate politicos passively assume that the GOP's goofiness and nastiness will turn off enough voters that Democrats can win by default. Meanwhile, the establishment insists that Democrats only push modest incremental reforms so as not to offend corporate funders or spook moderate Republicans. Hello, brilliant strategists. A primary function of the Democratic Party is to offend the corporate powers. Also, there are only about 6 moderate Republicans left in America, so appeasing them is not a big win, especially when it costs you the support of grassroots voters eager for a politics bold enough and big enough to end business-as-usual economics. This is Jim Hightower saying, as our own history teaches, it takes intentional gutsiness to create a politics that matters. Republicans won't do that. Will Democrats?
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
In 2022, does censorship work? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. On Russian state-controlled television, facts about Putin's invasion of Ukraine have been replaced with a relentless barrage of propaganda, endless hours of repeating that Nazis run Ukraine, and Russia needed to invade that country to save itself. Under a new law, any journalist or media outlet that asserts anything to the contrary faces 15 years in prison. With the result that in Russia, opposition to the war has been silenced. Over 80% of Russians, according to recent polling, support both the war and Putin. So, from Putin's point of view, his totalitarian censorship is working well. But dictators are not the only ones who utilize censorship. Some elected officials in the United States today are using an American, milder version of this theme. Recently, some states have enacted laws that, in broad strokes, prohibit the teaching or discussion in public schools of material that may be deemed critical of some of the history of the United States, such as the slave trade, slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, racial violence, and lynchings, what we used to call facts and history. Recent events have made plain that we should condemn and fight censorship anywhere and everywhere, anytime it rears its ugly head, in whatever form. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. For years, auto workers had participated in a series of sit-down strikes and walkouts. They had won union recognition from almost every major automaker in the country. But the Ford Motor Company, the giant of the American auto industry, would not budge. Ford used many tactics to undermine unionization. He hired many black workers with the idea that a racially divided workforce would be less likely to work together. He enlisted Detroit area pastors to recruit his workers. If a pastor would not support Ford's anti-union stance, then no members of that church would be hired. Ford also raised employee wages in an effort to win their loyalty. Ford created the Ford Service Department. The 8,000-member department included uniformed security who kept an eye out for union organizing, going so far as to use undercover spies to infiltrate union meetings. If none of those tactics worked, Ford simply fired thousands of workers who dared to speak out for a union. Despite all of this, the push for a union continued to grow. The effort was fueled in part by work speed-ups that led to more and more on-the-job injuries. Members of the Communist Party took a lead in organizing at Ford. This led to howls from the press about the red influence. Finally, on April 2nd, workers walked off the job to protest yet another round of firing union organizers. Some 85,000 workers marched in 27 picket lines. Despite Ford's effort to create a racial divide, more than 80% of the black workers joined the strike. Finally, today in labor history, Ford agreed to sit down with the United Auto Workers. At long last, one of the most anti-union employers in the U.S. had been brought to the bargaining table. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Ash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 39 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only 43, though we are, as I mentioned earlier, under a winter storm warning. Looks like snow this morning will give way to rain showers. Well, I believe there was snow at elevation a bit higher than where we are at because we've been getting quite a bit of rain. Winds are out of the west at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Looks like we're going to get about a quarter inch of this rain and snowy mix. And then cloudy with rain and snow showers this evening with snow showers overnight. Lows in the upper 20s. Winds out of the west at 10 to 15 miles per hour. And then tomorrow, rain and snow showers in the morning, changing to rain showers in the afternoon, bringing with it about a quarter inch of rain. Highs will be in the mid-40s with winds out of the west-southwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon continue to rise in spite of the fact that people have home tests and they don't turn in those test results to the county. But yet we still continue to rise with our confirmed cases, which now stand at 426,051. And our deceased have increased as well to 517. And, of course, these are numbers only up until Friday afternoon. We'll get the weekend totals Tuesday, maybe Wednesday now. Grass pollen is rated low outside the window here at Rogue River proper. The air quality index is good at 39 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at level 4. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.77 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles, and relative humidity is at 85%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 61 degrees and sunny. Paris is 67 and sunny. Rome is 64 and sunny. Kyiv is 50 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 68 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 75 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 65 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 68 degrees and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and cloudy, and New York is 50 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. staff of the Associated Press bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The manufacturing hub of Guangzhou closed itself to most arrivals today, Monday, as China battles a major COVID-19 surge in its big eastern cities. Shanghai has taken the brunt of the rise with another 26,087 cases announced today, only 914 of which showed symptoms. The city of 26 million is under a tight lockdown, with many residents confined to their homes for up to 3 weeks, and concerns growing over the effect on the economy of China's largest city. The financial hub has seen international events canceled because of the crackdown. A local football club, Shanghai Port, has been forced to withdraw from the Asian Champions League because travel restrictions prevented it from attending games in Thailand. No such lockdown has yet been announced for Guangzhou, a metropolis of 18 million northwest of Hong Kong that is home to many top companies and China's busiest airport. Just 27 cases were reported in the city today. However, primary and middle schools have been switched to online after an initial 23 local infections were detected last week. An exhibition center was being converted into a makeshift hospital after authorities said earlier they would begin citywide mass testing.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Damien J. Troz of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Stocks fell in morning trading on Wall Street today, Monday, as the markets extend a losing streak from last week. The S&P 500 fell 0.8% as of 10:20 a.m. Eastern. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 68 points to 34,654, and the NASDAQ fell 1.3%. Both the benchmark S&P 500 and the NASDAQ are coming off their first weekly loss in 4 weeks. Energy stocks were some of the biggest losers as they followed oil prices lower. U.S. crude oil prices fell 4.1%, and ExxonMobil slumped to 2.5%. Oil prices remain volatile amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which has put more pressure on global energy supplies. Global oil prices are roughly up 25% for the year, though they have been easing somewhat through April. Industrial companies and banks held up better than the rest of the market. Boeing rose 1.5% and Citigroup rose 2%. Bond yields gained ground. The yield on the 10-year Treasury rose to 2.76% from 2.71% from late Friday. Investors continue to remain uneasy about higher interest rates, Russia's war on Ukraine, and China's effort to contain coronavirus outbreaks. In China, automakers and other manufacturers are reducing production after authorities tightened restrictions to help stem coronavirus outbreaks in Shanghai and other cities that we just reported on. Wall Street will get several updates this week that could provide more clues about how the broader economy has been handling rising inflation. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.